Hey, welcome to the Simple Nutrition Podcast, a show that helps you learn practical and actual nutrition tips from an expert. I am your host, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian with over 8 years of experience in the nutrition field. Hey, welcome back to another episode in the Simple Nutrition Podcast. In today's episode, I want to dive deep into the nutrition facts label. You might ask yourself why, right? If we see the nutrition facts label everywhere. Well, the reason why that is because as a dietitian, as a nutrition professional, a lot of the times common things that I think everybody should know is not always the case. So I did a community nutrition presentation a couple of weeks ago, and it was on the nutrition facts label. And as I am asking questions to the public, and I'm asking, have you read the nutrition facts label? I see faces or heads that are saying yes. And then as we start to go in deep into every single part of the nutrition facts label, I see the eyes like lining up, right? Like, wow, I didn't know that. And so then it made me think, although we see the nutrition facts label every single day, maybe every single time we go to the store, it doesn't necessarily mean that maybe we understand it completely. And so I said, well, let's do an episode on that. Let's make sure that we provide the information that is needed and that we can use the nutrition facts label to our benefit. So it can actually be so helpful when we have these nutrition, fitness, and wellness goals, right? Because we number one, we want to see what we are putting into our system, but also we want to compare how, the amount of calories or nutrients that are listed, how they are compared to our daily needs. And so the nutrition facts label, right, was created by the Food and Drug Administration. And it was, guidelines that they gave to the food industry that they can go by, right? But don't take it as that is 100% accurate, right? Because there's some differences. The foods that we consume and then the nutrients that our bodies consume are not always going to be 100% what we are consuming, right? There's some differences there, but it kind of gives us a guideline, right, for just as a baseline essentially. And so we can still use it, right? It can still be very useful, but we have to also keep in mind that there's some errors in the sense of the amounts that we consume are not always going to be 100%. So let's start with the basics, right? When you go to the grocery store and you see something packaged, and we take a look, right? Especially if you do label reading. If you don't, this is an episode that is going to help you to understand it and be able to use it and read it, right? Without spending hours in the grocery store trying to figure out what it is that you're looking at. So let's say you look at a nutrition facts label. Now, if I'm broadcasting a nutrition facts label, so if you want to see a visual, you can check my YouTube video, which I'm going to link in the notes, as a visual. But I'm also giving you a resource that you can have handy, right, as a review, and that's also going to be linked in the notes. So don't worry, right? If you feel like, I don't know what you're saying, sometimes people having it as a visual can really help. But maybe you're at the store right now, or maybe you're at home and you can grab something, you can grab a product and you can go along with me. That's another option too. So let's start with the first thing, right? And the nutrition facts label has changed too. They're trying to emphasize more on the serving sizes and the calories and specific nutrients. So they're trying to make it more user-friendly. But with a specific nutrition facts label that I have in front of me and that you can view, the first thing that we have to look at is the serving size, right? Now, that's just the serving size for that specific product. It doesn't mean that that's how much you're going to eat. It doesn't mean that that's all you can eat, right? It's just the serving size for that specific product. So in this case, right, the serving size is 1 cup or 227 grams. But you also have to look at the number on top of the serving size, because that's the number of servings per container, right? So for example, in this case, there are 4 servings per that container or 4 cups, right? So if I eat 3 cups, right, or 3 servings, now I have to multiply all the numbers that are given to me on that nutrition facts label times 3, right? Because that's the amount that I ate. This is where the confusion is at times, right? I've had some people tell me, or some clients tell me, oh my gosh, I thought it was, the whole package was this many calories, and I could only eat, if I wanted to, I could only eat 1 cup, and I would divide that number. And that's not the case, right? The numbers that are given to you on the nutrition facts label, that's only for the serving size. In this case, it's 1 cup. But there are 4 serving sizes or 4 cups in the whole container, right? So if I want to eat the entire thing, I'll eat the entire thing, but I multiply all the numbers that are given to me on the nutrition facts label times 4. And that's the quantity that I'm eating. Okay, so serving size, right? Then the servings per container. And then we go on to calories, right? This is if, we're keeping track of our calories, or, we have a specific goal, then we look at that as well. Now, I want you to understand that the nutrition facts label, and they have a fine print at the bottom that is only based on 2,000 calories, right? So these numbers are based on 2,000 calories, assuming that if you're eating 2,000 calories, that's the daily value or the daily percentage according to 2,000 calories. So if your calories are a lot less, that means that the percentages next to the nutrients on that nutrition facts label are going to be a lot higher, right? Versus maybe you're eating a higher amount of calories, 3,000 calories. So the percentages are going to be less, right? Because you're comparing it to 3,000 calories. So I want you to keep that in mind, because that can also be very confusing, right? Like, oh, this product doesn't have a lot of fat, right? It's only however many percentage, and we're going to go over that shortly. But if your calories, right, are a lot less, let's say 1,500, right? That is a 500 different in terms of calories, in that comparison of 2,000 calories. So keep that in mind too, because that can also make a difference. So let's take a look at the nutrients after the calories, right? So then it's divided into total fat. Now, total fat, on this nutrition facts label, it doesn't have the unsaturated fats, right? Your healthy fats. There are some nutrition facts label that they do add them, and you can look at that as well. But this nutrition facts label only has total fat. Under that, you have your saturated fats and your trans fats, right? Like I said, if it has healthy fats, then it's going to have monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, again, which are your healthy fats. But for the purpose of this nutrition facts label, we're only looking at saturated fat and trans fat. Now, your saturated fats are going to come mostly from your animal foods, right? Butter or animal fat. Obviously, your animal proteins are going to have some saturated fat. And that's where you get your saturated fat from. But you also have your trans fats. Now, in every single nutrition facts that you see, you're going to see trans fat as 0, right? And that's because trans fats have been linked to a higher risk of cardiovascular issues, right? Heart disease. And so, obviously, the Food Administration and the USDA have given the food industry guidelines as to make sure that there is the least amount of trans fat that they can add to the food. But that doesn't mean that there's 0, right? So they are able to put trans fat as 0 grams if they have less than 0.5 grams or less of trans fat in that specific product per serving. So let's assume that this product has 0.4 grams of trans fat. They're not going to add it on the food label, right? Because it's not 0.5 or more. It's less. But how about if we eat multiple servings? It will add up to more than 0.5 grams, right? So in this case, 0.4. Let's say I consume 2 servings. Now it's 0.8 grams, right? It's more than 0.5 grams. So then I'm adding trans fat into my system, right? Even though it says 0. So how do we know if a product has a trans fat, even though it says 0 trans fat? The answer is it's going to be in your ingredients list. So not only you have to read the food label, you also have to read the ingredients list because you can know a lot of information there too. So trans fat, you're going to find it in something called hydrogenated oils or partially hydrogenated oils. And that is a trans fat. So it's basically a saturated fat that has been changed, right? Or it could even be any other type of fat that has been chemically changed to last longer, right? And it makes sense, right? Because if the food industry is trying to mass produce a product, it has to last longer on the shelves, right? And so they have identified that hey, if we manipulate it, we chemically change an oil that now is a trans fat, we can preserve foods longer. But what is the effect in our health, right? This is why it was recommended that the least amount of trans fat that is added to a food per serving has to be less than 0.5 grams. But that doesn't mean that it has 0, right? Like I said, if a food has 0 trans fat, but you really want to know, does this really have 0 trans fat? Let me take a look at the ingredients list. If there is a hydrogenated oil, a partially hydrogenated oil, that is a trans fat. So what can I do with this information? Great question. We want to limit that as much as I can, right? If we can consume foods that have 0, literally, you don't see it on the ingredients list, hydrogenated oils or partially hydrogenated oils, that's even better. Because long term, right, the more that we consume these foods, the more that affects our cardiovascular system. They basically are just like we're clogging our arteries, we're clogging our veins, right, with these type of fats because our bodies are like, I'm going to store that because I'm not sure how to use it, right? And so down the line, right, it's not going to happen right away, but down the line, you're going to have issues with that. So to recap on that, because that's a big topic. I can probably do a whole episode just on that. But total fat is divided into saturated fats, trans fats, and if it has healthy fats, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats. Trans fat is always going to be 0 on the nutrition facts label, but it doesn't mean that it has 0 trans fat. It just means that it has 0.5 grams or less. So take a look at the ingredients list and look at hydrogenated oils and partially hydrogenated oils to make sure that it actually has 0 trans fat. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to say on that, so I don't spend so much time on it. If you have questions, please reach out to me, send me a comment, send me an email, and we can go over more in detail on that specifically. So let's go down to cholesterol. Now, cholesterol is only found in animal foods, and our bodies produce cholesterol. So if we decided not to eat cholesterol ever again, then that's okay. We don't need it. Our bodies produce it. But we get it from animal foods. Any animal food that you consume is going to have some type of cholesterol. So it's added to the nutrition facts label because it can add up. It can also affect our cardiovascular health. So the recommendation for cholesterol in the whole day, right, that is coming from foods in general, it's 300 milligrams or less in a day. If you have heart issues, if you have high cholesterol, then the amount has to be a lot less, right? Because you want to make sure, you have to remember that your body's producing it already. So the less that you can have, the better. So 300 milligrams a day, it's what's recommended. But again, you get it from all animal foods. And so they have to add it to the nutrition facts label as well. The next one is sodium. So sodium is a mineral. It's a mineral that we need, but we also can have too much of it, right? And that can also affect our health. And so when you think about salt, right, sodium chloride, which is table salt, it adds so much flavor to food, right? And so the food industry has to add some type of salt or sodium to bring out the flavors of food, right? If we're so used to highly flavored foods, then something that is flavorless, nobody's going to want to buy it, right? And so they have to find ways for people to want to buy food. And so sodium is one of them. And it is amazing to see how much sodium a product can have. And so this one is really an eye-opener every time I teach about the nutrition facts label, because we don't really realize how much sodium something can have. So the recommendation in a day, right, for just the general population, of course, then we have factors that come into play when when we talk about sodium, but just for the general population, right, it's 2,300 milligrams a day of sodium coming from all sources, right? And so 2,300 milligrams, that's equivalent to 1 teaspoon of table salt. 1 teaspoon is a very small amount. But the thing is that most of the sodium comes from foods that we buy outside, from foods that we eat at a restaurant or a fast food place or packaged foods. Not so much from the food that we consume at home, because we're able to season it, we can add herbs and spices, and we don't need to add a ton of salt. But if we're buying a lot of our foods packaged, or we're eating out a lot, or we're eating fast food very often, multiple times during the week, that's where our sodium is going to come from, right? And it can be an outrageous amount, like 3,000 milligrams a day. Now, that's a lot, right? When we have a high amount of sodium, right, in our system, what happens is that our kidneys get triggered, right? Like, hey, there's too much sodium. Let's retain some water, because we need to have that balance in our blood system. And so then now we're making our kidneys work even harder. Now, if you're an athlete, then you're using sodium, right? Because it's one of the electrolytes, part of the electrolytes is a mineral, and you have to have that balance, but that's different. Now, if you have high blood pressure issues, my friend, the recommendation for sodium is 1,500 milligrams or less, because we're already so sensitive to the sodium, right? And so the more sodium that we add in our blood system, right, we have that imbalance, the more work that the kidneys have to do, because we're retaining more fluid, right? So then our blood pressure increases even more. So 1,500 milligrams or less for someone that has high blood pressure issues. But the general recommendation for the healthier population is 2,300 milligrams, obviously, or otherwise recommended by your physician or your doctor if you have other conditions where you have to restrict your sodium or increase your sodium, right? That's something that you have to talk to your doctor about. But let's take a look at this product, right? So for 1 cup, this has 850 milligrams of sodium. My friend, if you have high blood pressure issues, and remember that your recommendation is 1,500 milligrams, this is over 50% of what you need for the entire day, right? So you can see how it can accumulate very fast. But even for someone that doesn't have any issues with blood pressure, right, 850 milligrams is over 30% of what we need for the entire day, plus everything else that we're going to eat throughout the day, right? So we can see how adding so much sodium into our foods, into the foods that we buy, can really affect our health. So here is where the nutrition facts label can be very handy, right? You can look at the sodium, you can say, wow, this has a lot of salt. Maybe I'll see if I can find something that is healthier. For example, look for words that say low sodium, reduced sodium, no salt added, or lightly salted, or something like that. that is going to tell you that has a little less sodium, right? So that's it for the sodium. Again, I think I can spend a good amount of time in probably one episode in doing each of these nutrients, but this is just some general information to help you use the nutrition facts label more efficiently. So sodium, things to remember, right? The general population, 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day. If you have high blood pressure issues, 1,500 milligrams of sodium or less a day is what's recommended. And look at the nutrition facts label for the amount of sodium that is on that particular product. Then we go down to total carbohydrates. Now, total carbohydrates are going to include your fiber and your total sugars, either naturally occurring sugars or added sugars. That's where your carbohydrates are coming from. So total carbohydrates, again, is going to include the fiber and the total sugars. Total sugars can be naturally occurring or added sugars. So when we look at a nutrition facts label, let's see in this case, our total carbohydrates is 34 grams. 4 grams are coming from dietary fiber, and then 6 grams are coming from total sugars, right? And that's 10 grams. The rest could be coming from maybe natural sugars, right? They're not on there specifically, but you can kind of make that math. There's no added sugars, and so most likely are coming from naturally occurring sugars. And then we take a look at protein, right? Could be coming from different sources, animal versus plant sources, something else. And then we can also look at the minerals, vitamins and minerals. If you're also concerned about getting enough of those vitamins and minerals, or if you have maybe potassium restrictions, for example, some people that have heart issues or are on dialysis, they have potassium restrictions. And so that's one of the ways where you can look at the nutrition facts label and look at how much potassium is on that specific product. So that's the nutrition facts label. Now, there's some easier ways that you can read it. There is something called the daily value, percentage daily value. Again, this is based on 2,000 calories, meaning that the amount that is given there is compared to 2,000 calories. To give you an example, 9 grams of total fat, right? It says that that's 12% of the daily value, or 12% based on 2,000 calories. So if you have maybe a lower amount of calories, then you basically can make the calculation using that specific number of calories. So the easier way to read a full label, right, is looking at the percentage. So if something is closer to 5%, right, of the daily value, that means that it's low in that nutrient. If something is closer to 20%, that means that it's high, right? Because when you think about 20% of what I need for the entire day based on 2,000 calories is coming from that specific nutrient. Let's take the example of the sodium, right? So it says that 850 milligrams of sodium is 37% of what I need, again, based on those 2,000 calories, right? But if we think of, okay, 2,300 milligrams, she said that I need 2,300 milligrams. I don't have any blood pressure issues. So if we make the calculation, I'm using my calculator, 850 divided by 2,300, that is 36.9% or 37%, which is what the daily value told you, right? Of what you need for the entire day. If I'm only doing 1,500 milligrams because I have blood pressure issues, that is 57% of my daily value of what I need for the entire day in that specific product. Now, that's the easier way to read a full label, right? Look at the percentages. Keep in mind, okay, I'm consuming less than 2,000 calories. So I want to make sure that these numbers, specifically the fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, and sodium, and added sugars, I want them to be close to 5%, right? Because if I'm eating less than 2,000 calories, that means that those numbers that I'm given right now are higher for me, right? So I want them to be closer to 5% or less. The higher they are, obviously the higher are going to be for your specific calorie needs. And so that's how you can look at the nutrition facts label in more of an easier way, looking at the percentages. 5% or less are going to be low. The only one that you want to be high is your fiber. But again, fiber only comes from your plant sources: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, right? So if something has some kind of fiber, it's going to be added there, right? That's the only number that you want to be high on a nutrition facts label. The rest, you want them to be closer to 5%. So this is the easier way to read a full label. Again, depending on what your goals are, right? You want to keep track of these things. If it's really overwhelming, where you can say right now, Leonila, this is very overwhelming. I need some time to process this information. The beautiful thing is that you can listen to these episode again and again and again until you feel comfortable, and you can look at or reference the handout that I created for you. That can help you as well. You can print it, you can put it on your fridge, you can take it with you to the store, whatever you want to do. If you have more specific questions, you can always reach out to me, right? I'm going to add my email, so you can reach out to me there. But let's see here. There's a few other things that I want to show you. And I talked about these things already. So I talked about, one of the things that I haven't talked about, thank goodness I have this handy sheet, is the ingredients list. Now, a lot of the times, we don't really pay attention to the ingredients list unless if we're looking for something very specific, right? If I have a food allergy or if I have an intolerance to something, then I am going to look at the ingredients list. But it's not something that we do very often. In this case, right, we want to look at the ingredients list always. Again, because that trans fat, right? We have to make sure that on the ingredients list, we don't see hydrogenated oils, we don't see partially hydrogenated oils. And another thing that I did not talk about under the carbohydrates and then under the added sugars is the high fructose corn syrup, right? That is a type of sugar. It's an additive, right? It has been, again, chemically modified to last longer, but consuming high amounts of high fructose corn syrup, I forgot of the name. I just said it. High fructose corn syrup can have an impact in your insulin levels, in your glucose levels, but also your triglycerides in your liver, right? So we want to limit or avoid, if possible, those two ingredients: partially or fully hydrogenated oils and high fructose corn syrup. My friend, every time I read the ingredients list, I almost 90% of the time I see those two ingredients. And again, because they've been added to enhance the flavor, to extend the shelf life. But what it does to our health long term is not worth it. So if possible, right, we gotta limit those ingredients or avoid them if we can. So the ingredients list of a product are listed based on the quantity they contain. So if you read an ingredients list of a product and the first ingredient is sugar, that means that the majority of that product is made out of sugar, right? Because that ingredient is first and is based on quantity that is found on that specific product. So if something says whole grain, then you want to make sure that on the first ingredient says whole grain, right? Whole grain flour, whole wheat flour, or whatever the case may be, because you want to make sure it's actually made out of whole grain. Same thing with the rest of the ingredients, right? The last ingredient would be the least amount that is present in that specific product. Another thing that you can look at when you are shopping, right? But there's some other reminders that I give you here about the saturated fat, added sugars, cholesterol, sodium, fiber. But let's recap here, my friend, because I want to make sure that although this is a packed episode, that you don't leave with like feeling super confused. So we talked about the nutrition facts label, where you want to start. You always want to look at the serving size first, and then how many servings are in that container. Again, if you want to eat multiple servings, that's up to you, right? I'm not there to say don't eat that. I'm not the food police. But you have to keep in mind that however many servings you eat, you just multiply the entire numbers that are giving you on the facts label times those servings. Then you look at the calories, right? If you're concerned about the amount of calories you're consuming. And then you go down the list with the fats, the cholesterol, the sodium, the total carbohydrates, and the proteins. We talked about the percentage daily value, right? That's based on 2,000 calories. So you want to keep those numbers, your total fat, cholesterol, sodium, added sugars, closer to 5%. The only one that you want high is your fiber. And again, fiber only comes from your plant sources, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. And we talked about the ingredients list, right? That the first ingredient is based on the amount or the quantity that that product has. So the first ingredient is what makes the product essentially. And I think that's pretty much it. So again, if you feel overwhelmed, start with the foods that maybe you consume on a daily basis or frequently, and then if it's something that again has the hydrogenated oils, which is a trans fat, or the high fructose corn syrup, maybe finding an alternative, right? Because this is food that you're eating on a daily basis, right? Sometimes even multiple times during the day. So you want to make sure that whatever you're putting in your system, right, is something that is healthy and is something that is going to help you long term. So again, look at the show notes for the handout that I created for you. Reach out to me if you have any questions. If there's anything that you want me to talk about specifically, let me know. I'm always looking for other topics or ideas to talk about. And that is it, my friend. So happy shopping. Please don't feel overwhelmed. Take this handout with you to help you. Remember to stay safe and stay strong. Thank you so much for your time. I'll see you in another episode. Bye-bye for now. This podcast, the links and resources provided are for the purpose to educate only and are not a replacement for medical advice or nutrition therapy. I suggest you seek out the help of a trained professional to help you with your specific situation and needs.